On today's Locked On Giants podcast, the good, the bad, and the ugly from the New York Giants joint practice with the Jets. That's coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find my written work, as well as the written work of the talented group of writers that I am very fortunate enough to work with. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, to my everydayers, to my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for making Locked On Giants part of your day. It is appreciated. And on today's program, the Giants visited the Jets in Florham Park today for their joint practice. And we're going to take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly from that practice. It was, to sum it up, folks, the Jets won the day. I mean, hands down, they won the day. But it wasn't all gloom and doom. I know some of you are like, stop being so gloomy. Stop being so, tell us something positive. I'm going to try and give you a balanced report, folks, because look, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to say that everything is, fine, nothing to see here. I owe it to you to be honest and give you, what I observed and, just talk about what I think they could do to kind of fix some of these issues. So that's our agenda for today. Let's get into it. I'm going to start off with the positive stuff. Let's start off with the good stuff, because why not? One of the good things that popped out of this one, despite the fact that the Jets defense was very aggressive in this joint practice, Daniel Jones didn't have any miscues in terms of turning the ball over. There were no fumbles. I didn't see any interceptions. Now, granted, they did play it safe. There were a lot of check downs, a lot of dump offs. I don't think Daniel Jones attempted very many, if any, passes. Actually, check that. I don't think he attempted very many passes beyond 15 yards. So they did play it, kind of safe. Jones taking what the defense gave to him. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Jones had a bad day, because I don't think he did. It was a very cautious day. That's how I can best describe it for you. It was a cautious day. No mistakes, like I said, at least nothing that jumped out and made you say, what is he doing? So that was, certainly a positive takeaway, I thought, from the practices. Now, another thing real quick, Graham Gano, the kicker, he was perfect on all his field goal attempts. Gano, of course, is coming off that knee surgery that he had last year that ended his season. And, there was some concern earlier in camp about whether or not that injury affected his kicking motion. Today, I didn't see anything that made me say, uh-oh, he's not hitting the ball as, like he used to before the knee injury. So that was definitely a positive. And then let's talk about the one-on-one drills. The Giants defense versus the Jets offense. All right, so you had the pass rushers going up against the offensive linemen. Now, granted, Tyron Smith didn't really partake in these drills, but there was a lot of good there. And I thought Brian Burns just absolutely dominated. I mean, if we were taking, voting on a star of the afternoon, I think I would give it to Burns on defense, because nobody could get him blocked. Nobody could stop him. He was in the backfield. I think he had a couple of sacks on Aaron Rodgers. He just had a really, really strong practice, and that showed up in the one-on-one drills that they ran. I thought Kayvon Thibodeau held his own. At times there was a draw, but for the most part, he held his own. Dexter Lawrence, of course, is going to dominate, because that's what Dexter Lawrence does. Azeez Ojulari had a draw with his matchup. And Raheem Nunez Roaches and DJ Davidson, I thought had draws as well. So, look, the other guys get paid too. And, ideally you want to say that they won, the Giants won their matchups. But if they're having a draw where, they win one or they lose one, or that it's an equal type of meeting, I'll take it. So, look, that defensive pass rush is going to be so important, because as I get to the bad and the ugly part of the practice, you're going to understand why that defensive pass rush needs to be so good. Now, the other thing that I want to give kudos to, I thought Darius Slayton had himself a strong practice. Slayton has very quietly, done his thing. A lot of people were ready to ship him out of town. He's done his thing, and he's practiced well. He's been, sharp. You don't see him making very many mistakes. He fights for the ball. I think he's fighting for the ball a little bit more than what I recall seeing him do in prior practices. So that's certainly good to see as well. Other good stuff, there were no injuries that we know of, no fights, especially. I mean, it was a cooler day actually for the Jets and at Florham Park. At one point, it started to rain towards the end of the practice, but there were no fights. There was a little bit of pushing and shoving, but nothing, that escalated into a full-scale brawl. So that was good to see, because, the intense rivalry, you don't want to have guys lose their tempers and do something stupid. So they kept that under control. Like I said, just it was a spirited practice, but not to the point where you said, oh my gosh, this is turning into a free-for-all. So, the running game, I thought the Giants running game was solid. There were some good runs by Devin Singletary, by Eric Gray, who, poor Eric Gray, speaking of which, he got absolutely depleted. I think it was Chuck Smith that ran into him and literally knocked him off his feet and into the ground. So this poor guy, Eric Gray, who remember against the Lions, he got depleted in which he got hit and his helmet came off. I got to think he's like, okay, no more joint practices, please. So that was, the running game, certainly a positive for the Giants. And then, I'm thinking in terms of, the receiving game, Daniel Jones, I mentioned he didn't put any balls in harm's way, but a lot of his passes were short to intermediate, not a whole lot of deep balls. And I don't know if that was because that was how it was scripted. I don't know if it was because of the coverage, or maybe it was a combination of the two, but not a lot of deep balls. And good thing, because those deep balls that he did attempt, they just weren't going anywhere. So the passing game, not horrible, but not overly great. There were, I think, a couple of miscues with drops and whatnot, but we'll talk about that coming up a little later on in the program. So yeah, not a total washout for the Giants. Good stuff that they can build on, but there was also some concerns. We're going to talk about some of those concerns right after this. Hey, Giant fans. So when I'm not covering the team, I enjoy getting the chance to go to live events, whether they're concerts, plays, or other sporting events. And with the GameTime app, I never have to worry about being shut out of any event that I want to attend. GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite events even easier. GameTime Picks filter out the fluff to show you only the most incredible deals on great seats, so that you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. With GameTime, there are no hidden fees. You'll know exactly what you're paying for before you check out. You'll get clear images of your seat views, and you'll also get event cancellation protection. And if you find tickets elsewhere in the same section and row for less, GameTime will give you 110% of the difference. So go on and get the tickets to the events that you want. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms apply. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we're recapping the New York Giants joint practice with the New York Jets. It was held at the Jets facility, a really nice facility. You know, I've seen pictures of it. That was actually my first time on their grounds, and really a nice facility. It's the old Exxon headquarters in Florham Park across from Fairleigh Dickinson's Florham Madison campus, which is where I actually went to school for a couple of years for my graduate degree. So it was nice to see how they built that up, and it was a nice facility, great for the fans. They had stands all the way around the field, very spacious. So just a really nice environment, and nice change of scenery from the Quest Diagnostics Training Center. All right. Let's talk about the bad in the practice. And I think we've got to start off with the fact that, there was no explosiveness to the Giants offense. I think I mentioned this or hinted at it, in the previous segment. The Giants didn't attempt a whole lot of deep balls. I don't know if that was by design. I don't know if that was because what the Jets were giving them, but there were guys getting open. And Daniel Jones just either wasn't seeing them, or if he did see them, there were drops, which is another part of the bad. I mean, Malik Neighbors, I've got to tell you folks, Malik Neighbors, as good as he has been this summer, today had to be his worst practice, in my opinion. Just drops. I mean, there was one play in particular where he got behind a defender and the ball hit him in the hands and it fell right to the ground. And Malik Neighbors, after practice, was not happy with how he practiced. He said, I got to do better. So it was nice to kind of see him, acknowledge that he didn't have a good practice, that he could do better. We didn't see a whole lot of Malik Neighbors versus Sauce Gardner. That was kind of disappointing because, we were kind of looking forward to seeing, the Giants' number one receiver against the Jets' number one cornerback. But DJ Reed for the Jets primarily went up against Malik Neighbors, and you can call that almost a draw because there were times when Neighbors did beat him, but maybe the pass was either off or like I said, it was spatted away or it was dropped or whatever the case may be. But not a whole lot with Sauce, which is a shame. I mean, matter of fact, I don't think Sauce was targeted a whole lot in this practice. Certainly not in the team drills. Really the only time you saw Sauce was when he was waving goodbye to the Giants and just, on the sideline. I happened to be standing on the sideline behind the Jets bench, and he turned around and he said to, a bunch of, I guess there were a group of Giant media behind him. He goes, yes, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't remember the exact words, but he said, yeah, who's number one in New York? I felt like yelling out the Bills because the Bills play in New York, the Giants and Jets play in New Jersey, but I didn't say anything. I didn't think it would be smart to, and plus it's against the rules. So anyway, but yeah, the Giants, as far as the bad, the drops have got to get cleaned up. I mean, Malik Neighbors, again, strong summer. He's had a few drops here and there. Got to get those out of the game. Just this kid's going to be really, really good for the Giants. And he continues to learn. He hasn't hit his ceiling. He's nowhere near close to hitting his ceiling. And when he does, look out. I mean, the kid's got speed. He's got everything you could want. And he's got a rapport that he's building with Daniel Jones. But for today, that rapport just wasn't there. And again, that was because Jones didn't try a whole lot of deep balls. So that was kind of bad. The offensive line, I'm not going to say the line was horrible, but there were a couple of instances where Jones would have been sacked had it been a live rep. So that was a little concerning. Now the Giants' offensive line, the starting line, still hasn't worked together due to injuries. John Runyon Jr., who's dealing with a shoulder, did not make the trip. So you had Aaron Stinney in there. And by the way, Brian Dable said that Runyon Jr.'s injury is not something that's going to put him in jeopardy for week one. So, the Giants, the offensive line has been a lot better. I think that's a positive that we can take this summer, is that the line has not been the story of the summer where we're sitting here going, oh my gosh, what are they going to do here? Because this line is so terrible. And interestingly enough, I'm pretty sure I saw Evan Neal with the second team take a couple of snaps at guard. So, look, I've said before with Evan Neal that, or any offensive lineman on the Giants, Carmen Bricillo's philosophy, Carmen, of course, the Giants offensive line coach, his philosophy is unless you're a top 5 at your position, like an Andrew Thomas, or in this, the exception being John Michael Schmitz, who's a specialist at his position, you better be prepared to learn multiple positions on that offense line. So Evan Neal, I think we could all agree he's not top 5 as a tackle. He's got to be prepared to learn tackle and guard. So we'll see if that continues. Well, actually, with this, with there being one more training camp practice fully open to the media, we won't see if it continues because obviously the media won't be allowed to, to see it. But I'll keep you posted on that. I'll ask around and find out and see if perhaps that's still in the plans for Evan Neal. So yeah, that's pretty much the bad. Now, what about the ugly? And there was some ugly in this practice. Y'all know what where I'm going with this. I'm going to get into more detail, and I'm going to tell you why I think this group has been so ugly all summer long. And I'm going to answer another question related to why they don't bring back a certain player to help this group. So that's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And folks, please keep it here on the Locked On Giants podcast because I'm going to do one more show for the week. It'll probably be like a little preview. I'm hoping to get Ed Valentine on. I know we talked about possibly getting on and doing a show before the Jets game. And then we're going to have a show over the weekend. It's not going to be so much a Giants Jet game review as it's going to be a roster projection show. So that's kind of what we're looking at because roster cutdown is next week. And the Giants, I expect them to be very, very active on the waiver wire, especially, when it comes to this next group that was just flat out ugly today. You know who I'm talking about, folks, the Giants cornerback group. Just, oh my gosh. I mean, Deonte Banks had his struggles. Nick McLeod was absolutely toasted by Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. They on one deep play. Darnay Holmes was toasted on another one. I mean, you name it, these guys got toasted. And here's the problem. There's 2 problems actually with the Giants defensive backs that I see. Number one, if that pass rush doesn't get to the quarterback and rush the quarterback, and let's face it, they didn't as much today as you would have liked. Now you're asking that those defensive backs to cover longer, and they just can't keep up. That's part of the problem right there. When you're expecting an imbalance where, again, you have one unit that you need to do a little bit more to cover up for the lack of talent or the lack of efficiency in another, that's a problem, right? You can't expect the pass rush to get home every single time. It's just not real life. And I think that's part of the problem. Besides the fact that, you've got some youth back there, you've got some inexperience back there, and it's a very, very big problem. And it's been a problem since the spring. And, the Giants, in my opinion, they're going to have to do something. They're going to have to either trade for a guy or hope that like another Fabian Moreau type shakes loose on the waiver wire and they can get him to come in and, fill in for them. But I want to give you one other thing that I've noticed with the cornerbacks. And this could be at the root of the problem. And I think I want to ask, especially if it continues in the game, I think I'm going to ask Brian Dable about it. Just something I noticed in watching the cornerbacks today. A lot of the passes that get completed against them are contested catches, all right, which simply means that you fight for the ball and whoever fights the hardest usually comes down with it, all right? I don't see necessarily enough fight from the defensive backs. I just don't see it. It's like, the ball gets thrown and okay, most of them can keep up with these receivers. Occasionally you see an instance where somebody gets behind them or there's a big gap or there, somebody does a quick cut. Now all of a sudden, oh my God, I lost track of the guy. But the contested catches seem to be the biggest problem with this Giants defensive back group. And I'm not just talking the cornerbacks, I'm also talking the safeties. So I'm going to see if I can get that question in with Brian Dable next time he talks to the media, which will be tomorrow, and then after the game, and see if there isn't something there. But I just don't see enough in terms of pass breakup attempts. And I don't know why that is, but I'm going to see if I can get an answer because I think there's something to it there with these guys. They're just not playing aggressive enough. Now, some of you have said, all right, enough's enough. Go out and get Adoree Jackson back because he's still a free agent. Folks, there's a reason why Adoree Jackson hasn't been brought back, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with money. It has to do with, and this is just my opinion, by the way, I think it has to do with last year, if you watched Adoree, there were times when he was making business decisions and he wasn't going all out like he could have, because he probably figured, okay, I'm not going to be back, so I'm going to make sure that I don't get hurt. When a guy starts making business decisions and that affects his play, that's a problem. And teams notice that, Joe Shane, Brian Dable, Jerome Henderson, they all take note of that. If you're not out there giving your all on every single play and you're making business decisions, guess what? You ain't coming back because who needs you at that point? So I think it says a lot about the fact that here the Giants stand and they desperately, desperately need help at cornerback. And they haven't gone back to a guy who, not only has played decent enough for them in the past, but this is a guy who maybe even had some experience with Shane Bowen or at least the Tennessee Titan defense from his days with the Titans. So that tells you all you need to know. And, another guy that a lot of you asked me about is, well, why didn't they make a pitch for Stephon Gilmore? Well, two reasons. Number one, maybe Gilmore wanted to go to a team that he thought would be more competitive, that might have a chance of, making the postseason. Maybe, his price tag was too high and the Giants didn't want to spend on it. So, I mean, it could be any number of reasons. Just because the Giants don't sign a guy doesn't mean that, they don't want the guy. Now, the guy that's still out there that I would like to see the Giants try to get is Ahkello Witherspoon. Will they be able to get him? I don't know. Is Witherspoon saying to himself, hey, I want to go to a contender and the Giants ain't a contender, so I ain't going there? Does he want more money that the Giants are willing to pay? I don't know the answers to that. But here's what I do know. Cornerback is number one on the team's to-do list because they just don't have what they need. And when you think about the receivers that they're going to face this year, starting with Justin Jefferson, week 1, then Terry McLaurin, week 2, and the list goes on and on. That is scary because, like I said, you cannot keep counting on the defensive front every single time there is a pass to get home with pressure. It just doesn't happen. So they got to do something about that cornerback spot. And because right now it's just biting them in the backside that they were not able to address it the way that they needed to. So we'll see, what Joe Shane pulls out of his hat. I think, I go back to the Andrew Thomas contract restructuring, and they could have restructured the max with Andrew Thomas, but they didn't. I'm wondering if they maybe are earmarking that money that they saved on the salary cap to have just in case they are able to get a cornerback. So, will it be by trade? I mean, I don't know the answer. We'll have to see, obviously. But I have a gut feeling that something's cooking with regards to cornerback where, they know they can't go into the season with what they've got. They just can't. Cordell Flott's been hurt, and when he wasn't hurt, he wasn't looking that sharp anyway. Nick McLeod is, he's not a bad player, but you don't want him starting every week. You just have a lot of youth there, and nobody else has really stepped up and separated themselves. So right now, folks, cornerback to me is the ugliest position on this team as far as what we have seen. It's worse than quarterback. It's worse than offensive line. I mentioned offensive line hasn't been bad. It's worse than tight end, which has still got some question marks. That's how bad we are at with the cornerback. So we'll see how they address it, but they will address it. That much I can tell you. All right, Giant fans, that is going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, thank you for tuning in, spending part of your day with us here. It is appreciated. Make sure you're back with us tomorrow. Preview of the Jets game. And then also, like I said, I'm going to try and get Ed Valentine on so we could just kind of talk about the training camp and how it's gone. And and then coming up over the weekend, roster prediction show. So we'll see how that all goes. All right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow.